The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Kate Middleton sat at her dressing table staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied her lipstick, the same shade of rose she had worn on their wedding day 10 years ago. Today felt different, heavy with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. William had left early for his royal duties, as he did most mornings now. Their conversations had become formal exchanges about schedules and children's activities. Gone were the days when they would laugh over breakfast, sharing private jokes and stolen glances. The warmth that once filled their home had gradually cooled into polite coexistence. Kate remembered the exact moment when everything began to change. It was 6 months ago during a charity gala at Buckingham Palace. She had been speaking with a group of donors about her mental health initiative when she noticed William across the room. He was deep in conversation with Sarah, his new private secretary. Something about the way he leaned in to hear her speak, the genuine smile on his face, made Kate's heart skip a beat. Not from joy, but from a creeping realization that he hadn't looked at her that way in months. The children had become their bridge, the only safe topic of conversation. George's football matches, Charlotte's piano lessons, and Louis's endless energy kept them connected in the most basic way possible. But even those moments felt scripted, rehearsed performances of what they used to be naturally. Kate's phone buzzed on the dresser, a text from her sister Pippa asking if she was all right. Even her family had begun to notice the strain. At their mother's birthday dinner last week, Kate had caught herself staring into space while William made polite conversation with her father. The easy camaraderie they once shared seemed like a distant memory. She stood up and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens. The roses were in full bloom, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the gray feeling that had settled over her life. She remembered planting those roses with William during their first year of marriage. He had gotten soil all over his expensive shirt and laughed about it for days. Now she wondered if he even remembered that afternoon. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her turn. William appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his navy suit for the day's engagements. He looked handsome as always, but there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "The car will be here in 15 minutes, he said, his voice polite but impersonal. "I'll be ready," Kate replied, forcing a smile. They were scheduled to attend the opening of a new children's hospital together. Another public appearance where they would stand side by side, wave at crowds, and pretend that everything was perfect. The cameras would capture their coordinated outfits and professional smiles, and the newspapers would write about their strong partnership. None of them would see the carefully maintained space between them, or notice how they avoided looking directly at each other. Kate finished getting ready in silence. She chose her blue dress, the one that always photographed well, and paired it with her grandmother's pearl earrings. As she fastened the clasp, she remembered their engagement interview, when William had spoken so passionately about their partnership and shared dreams. They had been genuinely excited about their future together, about the difference they could make as a team. The car ride to the hospital was quiet except for the sound of papers rustling as they reviewed their separate briefing notes. William stared out his window while Kate pretended to study her schedule. The silence between them had become comfortable in its familiarity, even though it broke her heart a little more each day. At the hospital, they transformed into their public selves. William became the charming prince, engaging with staff and patients with genuine warmth. Kate lit up as she spoke with the children, her maternal instincts and natural compassion shining through. For a few hours, they fell back into their old rhythm, supporting each other during emotional moments and sharing quiet observations between meetings. But even their professional partnership felt hollow now. Kate could sense William going through the motions, his mind elsewhere. During their final walkabout, when a little girl asked if they were happy, Kate felt William's hesitation before he answered with a practiced, "Yes, of course." On the drive back to Kensington Palace, Kate finally broke the silence. "That little girl in the cardiac wing reminded me of Charlotte at that age." William nodded absently. "Yes, she was sweet." Kate waited for him to elaborate, to share the kind of personal observation that would have sparked a longer conversation in the past. Instead, he returned to his phone, scrolling through messages with a slight frown. That evening, after the children were tucked into bed, Kate found William in his study. He was reading official documents, his reading glasses perched on his nose. She stood in the doorway for a moment, remembering all the evenings she used to bring him tea, and they would talk about their day. Now she felt like an intruder in his space. "William," she said softly. He looked up, and for a brief moment she saw a flash of the man she had fallen in love with, but it disappeared quickly, replaced by polite attention. "We need to talk," she continued, stepping into the room. Something in her tone made him set down his papers and remove his glasses. For the first time in months, she had his complete attention. Kate felt her heart racing as she prepared to voice the thoughts that had been consuming her for weeks. The conversation she was about to initiate would change everything between them, and she wasn't sure either of them was ready for what came next. The clock on his desk ticked loudly in the silence, marking the seconds before their world would shift forever. Kate took a deep breath, knowing that once she spoke the words hovering on her lips, there would be no going back to the careful politeness they had been hiding behind. "I feel like we're living as strangers in the same house," Kate said, her voice barely above a whisper. William's expression didn't change, but she noticed his hands tighten slightly around the pen he had been holding. He set it down carefully and leaned back in his chair, creating even more distance between them. "Kate, we're both tired. It's been a long day," he said, his tone measured and diplomatic. She stepped closer to his desk, refusing to let him dismiss her concerns so easily. "It's been a long 6 months, William. Maybe longer. When was the last time we really talked? Not about schedules or the children or royal duties, but actually talked to each other." William ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized from their early days together when he was wrestling with difficult thoughts. Back then, she would have been the one he turned to for comfort. Now, she felt like she was adding to his burden. "Things have been complicated," he admitted, finally, meeting her eyes. "The new role as Prince of Wales has required more of my attention. There are responsibilities I never anticipated." Kate nodded, understanding the pressure he was under but knowing it wasn't the complete truth. "I understand that, and I've tried to support you. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being partners. We stopped being us." The word "us" hung in the air between them. Kate remembered when that simple pronoun had meant everything to her. Us against the world. Us building a life together. Us raising their children. Now it felt fragile, like something that might shatter if spoken too loudly. William stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. In the lamplight, Kate could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man carrying an invisible weight. She wanted to go to him, to place her hand on his back the way she used to when he was troubled, but the space between them felt insurmountable. "Sarah mentioned that you seemed distant during the staff meeting yesterday," Kate said quietly, immediately regretting bringing up his private secretary. William turned around, his expression sharper now. "Sarah is doing her job. She's helping me navigate challenges you couldn't possibly understand." The words stung more than Kate expected, not just because of what he said, but because of how easily he had defended Sarah while dismissing her concerns. She had seen how his face lit up when Sarah entered a room, how he laughed at her suggestions during meetings. It was the same attention he used to give Kate. "You're right," Kate said, surprising him with her calm response. "I don't understand everything you're dealing with, but I used to. You used to want me to understand. You used to share things with me." William's jaw tightened. "Things change, Kate. People change. The crown demands sacrifices that I'm not sure you're prepared to make." The accusation hit her like a physical blow. After 10 years of marriage, countless royal engagements, and adapting every aspect of her life to fit into his world, he was questioning her commitment. Kate felt tears threatening, but she refused to let them fall. "I've sacrificed everything for this life for you," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I gave up my career, my privacy, My freedom. I've smiled through criticism and supported you through every crisis. But apparently that's not enough anymore. William's expression softened slightly, as if he was seeing her clearly for the first time in months. Kate, that's not what I meant, isn't it? She challenged. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you've already decided I'm not the right partner for this new version of your life. The silence stretched between them, filled with years of unspoken resentments and growing apart. Kate realized this wasn't a conversation that would heal their marriage. It was the beginning of its end. Maybe we both need some time to think, William said finally, his voice gentler now but still distant. Kate felt something break inside her chest. Time to think was royal speak for stepping back, for creating official distance. She had heard Charles and Diana's separation described in similar terms by palace staff. What does that mean exactly? She asked, though she suspected she already knew. William returned to his desk but didn't sit down. He picked up the pen again, rolling it between his fingers as he spoke. Perhaps some separate engagements for a while. Give us both space to figure out what we really want. What we really want. As if their marriage, their children, their decade together was something to be reconsidered rather than fought for. Kate felt a strange calm settle over her, the kind that comes when the worst thing you've been dreading finally happens. And the children? She asked. We'll figure it out as we go. They don't need to know anything has changed. But everything had changed. Kate could see it in the careful way William was avoiding her eyes, in the formal tone he had adopted, in the way he was already treating her like a co-parent rather than his wife. I suppose I should speak with my private secretary about adjusting my schedule, Kate said, matching his professional tone. William nodded, relief evident on his face that she wasn't going to fight him on this. That hurt most of all, that he was relieved to be rid of her. Kate turned to leave, then stopped at the doorway. For what it's worth, I still believe in us, in what we could be if we fought for it instead of running away. She didn't wait for his response. Walking down the hallway toward their bedroom, Kate felt like she was moving through a dream. Everything looked the same paintings on the walls, the same carpet under her feet, the same furniture they had chosen together. But it all felt foreign now, like artifacts from someone else's life. In their bedroom, Kate sat on the edge of the bed they had shared for so many years. The pillow on William's side still smelled like his cologne, a scent that used to comfort her but now made her chest ache. She wondered how long it would take for that smell to fade, and whether she would miss it when it did. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, asking about dinner plans for the weekend. Kate stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How do you tell your family that your fairy tale marriage is quietly falling apart? How do you explain that Prince Charming has grown tired of his princess? Kate changed into her pajamas and brushed her teeth with mechanical precision. When William finally came to bed an hour later, they lay on opposite sides of their king-sized bed, the space between them feeling like an ocean. Neither of them said goodnight. Kate and William's silent parting. Part 3 weeks had passed since their conversation in William's study, and the changes were subtle but unmistakable. Their joint engagements had been quietly rescheduled, replaced with separate appearances. That allowed them to maintain their individual royal duties without the strain of pretending to be a united couple. Kate stood in the nursery of a London hospital, cradling a premature baby whose tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb. These solo engagements had become her refuge, places where she could be genuinely herself without the weight of performing a marriage that felt increasingly hollow. He's beautiful, she whispered to the baby's mother, a young woman whose eyes were filled with exhaustion and hope. The doctors say he's getting stronger every day, the mother replied. Having someone like you visit means everything to us. Kate smiled, feeling the familiar warmth that came from connecting with people in their most vulnerable moments. This was why she had embraced royal life, not for the titles or the glamour, but for opportunities like this to make a real difference. She wondered if William still felt the same passion for their work, or if duty had become just another burden for him. Her phone vibrated in her purse, a message from William's private secretary, not from William himself, informing her about a change in George's weekend plans. Even their communication about the children had become filtered through staff members, creating a formal distance that felt surreal after years of intimate partnership. That evening, Kate returned to Kensington Palace to find the children in the living room with their nanny. George was working on homework while Charlotte practiced piano and Louis built elaborate structures with his blocks. The scene was perfectly normal, yet Kate felt like she was observing it from the outside. Mummy. Louis ran to her with his characteristic enthusiasm, wrapping his small arms around her legs. Kate scooped him up, breathing in his sweet scent and feeling some of the day's tension melt away. Whatever was happening between her and William, these 3 beautiful children remained the best part of their life together. "Where's Papa?" Charlotte asked, not looking up from her sheet music. "He's working late tonight," Kate replied, the standard answer she had been giving more frequently. George, now 11 and increasingly perceptive, looked up from his math homework. "Papa's been working late a lot." Kate met his eyes and saw a flicker of concern there. Children notice everything, even when adults think they're being subtle. She sat down beside him, helping him with a particularly challenging problem while trying to project normalcy. After dinner and bedtime routines, Kate found herself alone in the sitting room with a cup of tea and her thoughts. The house felt different when William wasn't there, quieter but also less tense. She had begun to wonder if they were both more comfortable when they didn't have to navigate the awkwardness of being together. Her laptop chimed with an email from her private secretary about upcoming engagements. Kate scrolled through the list, noting how full her calendar had become. Separate schedules meant twice as many individual appearances, and she had thrown herself into the work with renewed energy. At least when she was out representing the crown, she felt purposeful and valued. One email stood out, an invitation to speak at an international conference on mental health in children. It was exactly the kind of high-profile platform she had been hoping for, a chance to make a significant impact on an issue close to her heart. But it was scheduled for the same week as William's environmental summit, an event they would normally attend together. Kate realized she was already thinking in terms of his events and her events rather than their shared royal calendar. The separation was becoming more defined with each passing day, even if neither of them had officially acknowledged it. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. It was Pippa. "How are you holding up?" her sister asked without preamble. Kate had always been able to be honest with Pippa, but royal protocol made complete openness difficult even with family. "It's been a challenging few weeks. Mum's worried about you. She says you look tired at Charlotte's recital." Kate had hoped. Her carefully applied makeup and bright smile had hidden the strain, but apparently not from her mother's sharp eyes. "Just busy with work. You know how it is." "Kate," Pippa's voice was gentle but firm. "You can talk to me. Whatever's going on, you don't have to handle it alone." For a moment, Kate was tempted to tell her everything, to admit that her marriage was quietly dissolving, that she felt more isolated than ever despite being constantly surrounded by people, that she wasn't sure how to protect her children from the fallout of their parents' growing distance. "I'm fine, Pippa, really, just tired." But she wasn't fine, and she suspected Pippa knew it. After they hung up, Kate stared at her reflection in the darkened window. She looked older than her years, worn down by the effort of maintaining appearances. While her personal world crumbled, the front door opened and she heard William's footsteps in the hallway. He appeared in the doorway of the sitting room, still in his suit from whatever evening engagement had kept him out late. "How are the children tonight?" he asked, his tone polite but distant. "Good." Louis asked for an extra story. Charlotte played her new piece perfectly. Kate paused, then added, "George noticed you've been working late more often." William's expression tightened slightly. "I'll make sure to spend time with him this weekend." They were discussing their son like divorced parents coordinating custody. Arrangements, Kate realized with a chill. When had they started talking about their own children as if they were separate entities to be managed rather than a family unit? "I've been invited to speak at a mental health conference," Kate said, testing the waters of communication. "That sounds like a good opportunity for you," William replied, but his attention was already drifting toward the stack of papers he had brought home. Kate waited for him to ask about the details, to show the kind of interest he would have expressed a year ago. Instead, he gathered his papers and headed toward his study. "William," she called after him. He stopped and turned back, waiting. Kate wanted to say so many things, that she missed talking to him, that she was scared about what was happening to their family, that she loved him and wanted to find their way back to each other. Instead, she said, "Don't forget George has his football match on Saturday morning." "I won't forget," he replied, and disappeared into his study. Kate remained in the sitting room for another hour, listening to the sounds of William moving around his study, occasionally making phone calls in low tones she couldn't quite hear. They were living parallel lives in the same house, connected only by their children and their shared royal duties. When she finally went upstairs, she paused outside his study door, hearing him laugh at something someone had said on the phone. It was a genuine laugh, the kind she hadn't heard from him in months. Kate wondered who could still make him laugh like that, and realized with painful clarity that it wasn't her anymore. The photographs appeared in the morning papers like a punch to Kate's stomach. William at a charity dinner the night before, laughing with Sarah beside him at their table. The images were innocent enough, two colleagues at a work event, but Kate could read the subtext in the way they leaned toward each other, the comfortable intimacy of their body language. She sat at the breakfast table, newspaper spread before her. While the children ate their cereal and chattered about their plans for the day, Charlotte was excited about a friend's birthday party, and George wanted to practice his football skills before his match. Their normalcy felt surreal against the backdrop of Kate's crumbling world. "Mummy, why do the papers always take pictures of you and Papa?" Louis asked, looking up from his toast with jam smeared across his cheek. Kate reached over to wipe his face, buying herself time to formulate an answer. "Because people are interested in the work we do to help others." It was the standard explanation she had given countless times, but today it felt hollow. People weren't interested in their charitable work. They were interested in the fairy tale, the perfect royal marriage, the beautiful family. What would they think if they knew the truth? William appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day. He glanced at the newspaper on the table, and Kate saw a flicker of something cross his face. Guilt, perhaps, or annoyance at being caught. "Good morning," he said to the children, his voice warm and natural in a way it never was when he spoke to Kate anymore. After breakfast, the children were whisked away by their nannies and protection officers for their various activities. Kate found herself alone with William for the first time in days, an occurrence that had become increasingly rare and uncomfortable. "We need to discuss our appearances at next month's state dinner," William said, consulting his phone rather than looking. At her, Kate felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. Of course he wanted to talk about work, about maintaining their public image while their private life fell apart. "Will Sarah be attending as well?" The question came out sharper than she intended. William finally looked at her, his expression guarded. "She coordinates many of my official functions now. Her presence is often necessary." Necessary. Kate wondered when she had stopped being necessary to him, when she had become optional while his private secretary became essential. "I see," Kate said quietly. "And how should we handle the press questions about why we've been doing so many separate engagements lately?" William's jaw tightened. "We tell them what we've always told them, that we're working to maximize our impact by covering more ground individually." It was a reasonable explanation, the kind of diplomatic response that satisfied journalists and protected royal privacy. But Kate could hear the finality in his tone, the way he had already decided their future without consulting her. "What if I don't want to keep pretending?" Kate asked suddenly. The words hung between them like a challenge. William set down his phone and looked at her with the first genuine attention she had received from him in weeks. "What are you saying, Kate?" She wasn't sure herself. The question had emerged from some deep place of exhaustion and honesty that she hadn't known existed. "I'm saying that I'm tired of performing happiness when we're both miserable. I'm tired of smiling for cameras while we can barely look at each other at home." William was quiet for a long moment, and Kate could see him weighing his words carefully. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than it had been in months. What would you have us do? Air our private struggles for public consumption? Put the children through the circus of a royal separation? The word separation landed between them with devastating clarity. It was the first time either of them had spoken it aloud, giving form to what had been hovering unspoken for weeks. Is that what this is? Kate asked. A separation? William's silence was answer enough. Kate felt something inside her chest crack open, a grief she had been holding back finally finding its voice. When did you stop loving me? She whispered. The question seemed to pain him. William ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that had once been endearing, but now just looked weary. I don't think I ever stopped loving you, Kate, but I'm not sure I remember how to be married to you anymore. His honesty was both crushing and oddly liberating. At least now they were finally talking about what was really happening instead of hiding behind schedules and protocol. We could try counseling, Kate offered, though even as she said it, she could see in his expression that he had already moved beyond that possibility. What would we tell them? That the future King of England can't manage his own marriage? That we need help to pretend to be happy? Kate understood then that William's resistance wasn't just about their relationship. It was about the image, the institution, the weight of expectations that had shaped every aspect of their lives since they were teenagers. He couldn't allow himself to be vulnerable or seek help because it would be seen as weakness in a role that demanded unwavering strength. So we just give up? Kate asked. We adapt, William replied. Lots of royal marriages have survived by finding new arrangements. Separate wings, separate lives, united public front. The clinical way he described their future made Kate feel sick. She thought about Charles and Camilla, about Diana's isolation, about all the royal marriages that had become business partnerships rather than love stories. That's not what I want for our children, Kate said firmly. It's better than the alternative, better than divorce proceedings and custody battles played out in the tabloids. Kate realized that William had been thinking about this far longer than she had known. While she had been hoping they could find their way back to each other, he had been planning their separate futures. I need some time to think about all of this, Kate said, standing up from the table. William nodded, relief evident on his face. Take all the time you need. Nothing has to be decided immediately. But Kate could see that for him everything had already been decided. She was just the last to know. That afternoon, Kate drove herself to her parents' house in Berkshire, something she rarely did without official protection and advance notice. She needed to be Kate Middleton for a few hours, not the Princess of Wales, not William's wife, not anyone's mother. Just herself. Her mother took one look at her face and made tea without asking questions. They sat in the familiar kitchen where Kate had grown up, surrounded by family photos that documented happier times. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, Carol Middleton said gently. Kate finally let herself cry, all the tears she had been holding back for months. Her mother held her hand and waited, offering the kind of unconditional support that Kate had almost forgotten existed. I don't know how to fix this, Mom, Kate whispered between sobs. Maybe it can't be fixed, darling. Maybe that's okay too. The permission to let go, to stop fighting for something that might already be lost, was both terrifying and freeing. Kate realized she had been clinging to an idea of her marriage rather than its reality, holding on to memories while ignoring the present truth. Kate returned to Kensington Palace that evening with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. Her conversation with her mother had helped her understand that she had been fighting for a version of her marriage that no longer existed, perhaps hadn't existed for longer than she cared to admit. The children were already in bed when she arrived, but she went to each of their rooms to kiss them goodnight. George stirred when she brushed his hair back from his forehead. Mum? Are you and Papa okay? He asked in the darkness, his voice small, and worried Kate's heart clenched. Despite their efforts to shield the children, George's perceptive nature had picked up on the tension between his parents. She sat on the edge of his bed, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups go through difficult times, sweetheart. But Papa and I will always love you and Charlotte and Louis more than anything in the world. Are you getting divorced like Tommy's parents? The direct question from her 11-year-old son took Kate's breath away. She realized that George's friend's recent family breakdown had given him a framework for understanding what he was observing at home. "Papa and I are figuring some things out," Kate said honestly. "But no matter what happens, we will always be your parents and our family will always be strong." George nodded solemnly, satisfied with her answer for now. Kate knew there would be more difficult conversations ahead, but she felt relief at finally being truthful with him. She found William in the sitting room reading through official papers with a glass of whiskey beside him. He looked up when she entered, and she could see exhaustion in his eyes that matched her own. "How was your mother?" he asked, his tone neutral but not unkind. "Honest," Kate replied, taking a seat across from him rather than beside him on the sofa. "George asked if we're getting divorced." William's face tightened. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That we're figuring things out, but that we'll always be his parents." William nodded slowly. "We need to prepare them better. If word gets out before we're ready." "When will we be ready, William?" Kate interrupted. "When will we stop pretending and start dealing with reality?" He set down his papers and looked at her with the full attention she had been craving for months. "What do you want, Kate? Really want?" The question was simple but profound. Kate realized she had been so focused on trying to save their marriage that she hadn't considered what she actually wanted her life to look like. "I want to feel valued," she said quietly. "I want to be someone's first choice, not their obligation. I want my children to see what real love looks like, not what duty looks like." William was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had heard in months. "I've been unfair to you, I know that. I let the pressure of my new role consume everything else, including us. I stopped seeing you as my partner and started seeing you as another responsibility to manage." His admission was both validating and heartbreaking. Kate had been feeling invisible for so long that having him acknowledge her worth felt like a small victory, even if it came too late. "Why didn't you talk to me when things started getting difficult?" Kate asked. "We used to be able to talk about anything." William's expression grew pained. "Because I was afraid you'd see what I was seeing. That I wasn't the man you fell in love with anymore. That I was becoming someone I didn't even like." Kate felt a stab of empathy for him despite everything. The weight of his position had changed. Him. And she could see now that he had been struggling with that transformation, just as much as she had been struggling with its effects on their relationship. "You're still that man," Kate said gently. "I see glimpses of him sometimes. With the children when you're doing work you're passionate about. He's still there. But not with you," William said, and it wasn't a question. Kate shook her head. "Not for a long time." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of their honest conversation settling between them. Kate felt sad but also relieved that they were finally talking about their reality instead of avoiding it. "Sarah isn't the problem," William said suddenly. "I need you to know that nothing inappropriate has happened." Kate believed him, but she also understood that emotional intimacy could be just as threatening to a marriage as physical betrayal. "But you connect with her in ways you don't with me anymore." William nodded reluctantly. "She understands the pressures of my role in ways that feel easy. I don't have to explain or apologize for the demands of duty." "Because I was always pushing back against those demands," Kate realized. "I was trying to preserve our personal life, our family time, our marriage. But you saw that as another burden." "I'm sorry," William said, and Kate could hear that he meant it. "I should have valued your perspective instead of resenting it." Kate felt tears threaten but held them back. "Where does this leave us?" William leaned back in his chair, looking older than his years. "I think we both know our marriage can't continue the way it has been. We're making each other miserable." "So we separate officially?" Kate asked, surprised by how calm she felt about the possibility. "Quietly, carefully, with as much dignity as we can manage. For the children, for the institution, for ourselves." Kate nodded. The conversation she had been dreading for months was happening, and it wasn't as devastating as she had imagined. There was sadness, yes, but also a sense of release from the constant tension of pretending. What will we tell people? That we're taking some time apart to focus on our individual royal duties and personal growth. That we remain committed to our children and to serving the crown. It was a careful, diplomatic way of acknowledging their separation without admitting failure. Kate understood the necessity of protecting their public image, but she also felt tired of the constant performance. And eventually, William's pause told her everything she needed to know. Eventually, we'll need to make it official. But not yet. Let's give ourselves time to adjust, to help the children understand, to prepare the institution for the change. Kate understood. They would have a trial separation, a quiet stepping back that would allow them both to discover who they were, apart from each other. The thought was both frightening and liberating. "I'll need to find somewhere else to stay," Kate said practically. "At least sometimes. We can't keep living in the same house and pretending we're taking time apart." "Anmer Hall," William suggested, referring to their country home in Norfolk. "You've always loved it there. The children can spend weekends with you, and I'll have them during the week in London." Kate nodded. Anmer Hall had been their refuge in happier times, a place where they could be a normal family away from the pressures of royal life. It seemed fitting that it would become her sanctuary during this transition. "When?" she asked. "Whenever you're ready. There's no rush. We'll tell the staff it's a temporary arrangement for you to focus on your countryside projects." Kate almost smiled at how easily they fell into damage control mode, creating plausible explanations for what was essentially the end of their marriage. Years of royal training had prepared them for managing crises, even personal ones. "The children will need counseling," Kate said. "Professional help to understand what's happening." "Agreed. I'll have my office arrange something discreet." They were discussing the dissolution of their family with the same careful planning they might use for a state visit. Kate realized this was how royal marriages ended, not with screaming arguments or dramatic confrontations, but with quiet conversations about logistics and public relations. "William," Kate said as he began gathering his papers, preparing to retreat to his study. "For what it's worth, I don't regret our marriage. We had some beautiful years together. We created 3 amazing children. We supported each other through incredible challenges." William looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. "I don't regret it either. I just regret that we couldn't find our way back to each other." "Maybe we were too young when we started," Kate reflected. "Maybe we never learned how to grow together instead of growing apart." "Maybe," William agreed. "Or maybe some love stories aren't meant to last forever, even when we desperately want them to." Kate felt a tear slip down her cheek at his words. There was something poetic and final about that acknowledgement, a gentle way of letting go of the fairy tale they had tried so hard to maintain. "Will you be okay?" William asked. And for a moment, Kate glimpsed the man who had once cared for her so deeply. "I think so," she said honestly. "Will you?" "I think we both will be eventually." That night, Kate lay in their bed for what she knew would be one of the last times. William had gone to sleep in the guest room, claiming he had early calls that would disturb her rest. They both knew it was the beginning of their physical separation, the first step toward living separate lives. Kate stared at the ceiling, thinking about the conversation they had just had. It wasn't the angry confrontation she had imagined or the tearful reconciliation she had hoped for in her weaker moments. Instead, it had been mature, respectful, and deeply sad. They were ending their marriage the way they had conducted it in recent years, with careful consideration for everyone except their own hearts. She thought about calling Pippa or her mother, but realized she wasn't ready to share what had happened. The conversation with William had been the first step in a long process of untangling their lives. There would be time for explanations and support. 6 months later, Kate stood in the garden at Anmer Hall, watching the autumn leaves drift down from the old oak trees. The Norfolk countryside had become her sanctuary, a place where she could breathe freely without the weight of constant scrutiny. The children were with William in London during the school week, and she had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of her new life. The separation had been handled with the discretion that royal protocol demanded. To the outside world, Kate was simply spending more time focusing on her rural initiatives, while William managed his increased responsibilities as Prince of Wales. Their joint appearances had become rare but cordial, professional partnerships that maintained the facade of unity while allowing them both the space they needed. Kate's phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte, a photo of her latest art project with a heart emoji. The children had adjusted better than expected, perhaps because the tension that had filled Kensington Palace had been replaced by genuine warmth during their time with each parent separately. Kate and William had both become better parents when they weren't struggling to be spouses. She walked back into the house, her footsteps echoing in the rooms that had once been filled with family laughter, but now held a different kind of peace. Kate had redecorated slightly, adding touches that were purely her own, books she wanted to read, artwork that spoke to her personally, furniture arranged for her comfort rather than royal protocol. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table, displaying the final draft of a speech she would give next week at a mental health conference in Edinburgh. Working alone had allowed her to dive deeper into causes she was passionate about, to speak more authentically without having to coordinate every message with William's team. The doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence at Anmer Hall. Kate opened it to find William standing on her doorstep, looking uncertain in a way that reminded her of the young man she had first fallen in love with at university. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by," he said. "I was in the area for the Norfolk Wildlife Preservation meeting." Kate stepped aside to let him in, noting that he looked healthier than he had in months. The constant strain that had marked his features during their final year of marriage had eased, replaced by something that looked like contentment. "How are the children settling back into school?" Kate asked, leading him to the sitting room. "George made the football team, and Charlotte's teacher says she's the most improved student in her class. Louis is Louis, charming everyone and getting into just enough trouble to keep things interesting." They both laughed, and for a moment, it felt like old times. Kate realized this was the first relaxed conversation they had shared in over a year. "They're thriving," William continued. "I think having us both happier separately is better for them than having us miserable together." Kate nodded. "George told me last weekend that he likes having two homes. He said it means he gets more one-on-one time with each of us." "Smart boy," William said fondly. "Too smart sometimes. He asked me yesterday if we were going to get divorced, like his friend's parents." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That sometimes people who love each other very much realize they're better as friends than as husband and wife." Kate felt a bittersweet pang at his words. It was exactly the right thing to say to their son, but it also crystallized what they had both been avoiding acknowledging directly. "Is that what we are now?" Kate asked quietly. "Friends?" William considered this carefully. "I'd like us to be. We were friends before we were anything else. Maybe we can find our way back to that." The suggestion felt both hopeful and melancholy. Kate remembered their university days, the easy companionship they had shared before royal duties and public expectations complicated everything. Perhaps they could reclaim some version of that connection. "I've been thinking about the future," William said, his tone becoming more serious. "About making things official." Kate had been expecting this conversation. 6 months of separation had given them both clarity about their situation. Divorce? Eventually, yes, but handled carefully with dignity. "I want to make sure you're protected, that you have everything you need to build the life you want." Kate appreciated his thoughtfulness, but she also heard the finality in his voice. This wasn't a negotiation or a request for her opinion, it was notification of his decision. "What about my royal duties?" Kate asked. "You'll always be the children's mother. That connection to the family can't be changed. As for your work, I hope you'll continue the causes you're passionate about. You don't need a royal title to make a difference in the world." The conversation was surreal. They were discussing the end of their marriage with the same calm rationality they had once used to plan their engagement announcement. Kate wondered if this was maturity or simply emotional exhaustion. "There's something else," William said, his voice quieter now. Sarah and we've grown closer during these months apart. I want to be honest with you about that. Kate felt a familiar stab of pain, but it was duller now, manageable. She had suspected this development even if she hadn't wanted to acknowledge it. Are you happy? She asked, surprising herself with the genuine concern in her voice. William's expression softened. I think I could be. She understands this life in ways that feel natural to me. We work well together. Kate nodded, understanding that this wasn't about choosing Sarah over her, but about finding someone whose approach to royal life complemented his in ways theirs never had. I want you to be happy, William, Kate said, and meant it. We both deserve that. So do you, he replied. Have you thought about what you want to do? Where you want to live? Kate had been considering this question for months. I'd like to keep Anmer Hall if possible. Make it my primary residence. London feels too complicated now. Of course, it's always been more your home than mine anyway. They talked for another hour about practical matters, custody arrangements, financial settlements, timing for the announcement. It was the most civil divorce planning session in royal history, conducted with tea and biscuits in a cozy sitting room overlooking the Norfolk countryside. As William prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Kate, I want you to know that loving you wasn't a mistake. Marrying you wasn't a mistake. We just weren't meant to stay married. Kate felt tears threatening for the first time during his visit. I know. And William, thank you for setting us both free. After his car disappeared down the drive, Kate walked back out to her garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded her of their wedding day a lifetime ago. But instead of sadness, she felt a deep sense of peace. Her phone rang. It was her mother. How are you, darling? I'm okay, Mom. Really okay. You sound different. Lighter. Kate smiled, looking out at the countryside that had become her refuge and was about to become her permanent home. I think I'm finally figuring out who I am when I'm just Kate. And who is that? Kate considered the question, thinking about the woman she had been before royal life, the mother she had become, the advocate she was still becoming. Someone who's strong enough to choose her own happiness, she said finally. As night fell over Anmer Hall, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in years, excitement about her future. The fairy tale was ending, but real life was just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like exactly where she was meant to be. In the distance, church bells chimed the hour, marking not an ending, but a transformation. Kate Middleton was about to discover who she could become when she stopped trying to be who everyone else needed her to be.